Think back to the moment you clicked on this video. It probably felt like a simple decision. You saw the title. You became curious. You clicked. But what if that isn't what actually happened? What if your brain had already made that choice before you ever became aware of it? It sounds impossible. Yet for decades, neuroscientists have been uncovering evidence that many of our decisions begin long before our conscious mind catches up. By the end of this video, you may question whether your choices are truly your own. And the experiment you're about to see has forced scientists, philosophers, and psychologists to debate one unsettling question. Do we actually control our own minds? Every day, you make thousands of decisions. Some are obvious. What to eat, what to wear, which message deserves a reply. Others happen so quickly you never notice them at all. Where your eyes move, how your voice changes during a conversation, whether you trust someone after only a few seconds. Most of us believe these decisions are made consciously. We imagine our conscious mind sitting behind the controls, carefully evaluating every option before acting. But modern neuroscience paints a very different picture. And once you understand it, you'll never look at your own thoughts the same way again. Your brain weighs only about 3 pounds. Yet despite making up just 2% of your body's weight, it consumes roughly 20% of your total energy. That's an extraordinary amount of power. Evolution couldn't afford to let such an expensive organ waste energy analyzing every tiny action from scratch. So over millions of years, the brain developed an elegant solution. Instead of consciously calculating everything, it automated almost everything. And that single adaptation changed the way humans experience reality itself. Think about your morning routine. Did you consciously plan every movement while brushing your teeth? Did you calculate exactly how to tie your shoes? Probably not. Your brain handled those tasks automatically. In fact, you've probably experienced something even stranger. Driving home after work, only to suddenly realize you don't remember the last 10 minutes of the journey. You arrived safely. You obeyed traffic lights. You avoided other cars. Yet your conscious memory is almost empty. Who was driving? Your brain was. If your brain can perform complex actions without your awareness, could it also make decisions before you're aware of making them? For decades, that question seemed impossible to answer, until one scientist designed an experiment so simple, and yet so disturbing, that it continues to challenge everything we think we know about free will. We'll get to that experiment soon. But first, you need to understand why consciousness may not be what you think it is. Imagine a massive corporation with thousands of employees. Every day, analysts gather information. Managers organize it. Engineers solve problems. By the time the CEO enters the room, the hard work is already done. The CEO simply approves the final decision. Later, everyone says, the CEO made the choice. Your conscious mind often behaves exactly like that CEO. Most of the real processing happens behind the scenes. Consciousness simply arrives at the end and claims ownership. Your brain isn't simply reacting to the world. It's constantly predicting it. When someone begins a familiar sentence, your brain already expects the ending. When you hear your favorite song, you anticipate the next note before it plays. Even while walking, your brain predicts where your next footstep will land before your muscles move. You're not just experiencing reality. You're experiencing your brain's best prediction of reality. And that tiny difference changes everything. In the early 1980s, neuroscientist Benjamin Libet decided to test a radical idea. Could electrical activity inside the brain reveal a decision before the person consciously knew they had made one? Nobody expected the results, because what his team discovered would become one of the most controversial findings in neuroscience. And once you see the data, you may never think about free will the same way again. The experiment itself was surprisingly simple. Participants sat comfortably in front of a screen while electrodes recorded the electrical activity inside their brains. Their task was straightforward. Whenever they felt the urge, they could flex their wrist or press a button. There was no right or wrong moment. No complicated instructions. Just make the movement whenever you decide to. At the same time, they watched a rapidly rotating clock and were asked to remember the exact moment they first became aware of the intention to move. It sounded almost too simple to reveal anything important. But hidden inside those tiny fractions of a second was a discovery that would challenge one of humanity's oldest assumptions. When the researchers analyzed the recordings, they noticed something remarkable. Before participants reported the conscious decision to move, Their brains had already become active. A slow wave of electrical activity appeared hundreds of milliseconds before they said they had made the choice. This signal became known as the readiness potential. In other words, the brain seemed to be preparing for the action before the conscious mind experienced the intention. For many scientists, this was deeply unsettling. If the brain starts the process first, what exactly is consciousness doing? Newspapers quickly embraced a dramatic conclusion. Free will doesn't exist. Your brain decides first. You only become aware afterward. It was a headline that spread around the world. But science is rarely that simple. Libet himself wasn't convinced that consciousness was completely powerless. He believed something else might still be happening in those final moments before an action, a possibility that would become just as controversial as the original experiment itself. We'll come back to that idea shortly, because first, there's another mystery you need to understand. Imagine watching a movie where someone secretly edits every scene before you see it. You'd believe you were watching reality, but you wouldn't be. Your brain works in a surprisingly similar way. Long before information reaches your conscious awareness, it has already been filtered, organized, simplified, and in some cases, completely rewritten. The world you experience isn't raw reality. It's your brain's carefully edited version of it. Every second, your senses collect an overwhelming amount of information. Millions of colors, thousands of sounds, endless textures, tiny movements. If your conscious mind processed every detail, you wouldn't be able to function. So your brain performs an extraordinary act of compression. It keeps only what it predicts is important. Everything else is quietly discarded, without you ever realizing it existed. One famous psychological experiment demonstrated this perfectly. Participants watched several people passing basketballs and were asked to count only the passes made by one team. Most completed the task successfully, but something extraordinary happened. A person wearing a full gorilla costume walked directly through the middle of the scene, stopped, faced the camera, beat their chest, and walked away. Shockingly, nearly half the participants never noticed the gorilla at all, not because their eyes failed, because their brain decided it wasn't relevant. This phenomenon is called inattentional blindness, and it happens every single day. You miss objects that are directly in front of you. You overlook details during conversations. You fail to notice changes in familiar places, not because you're careless, but because attention is limited. Your brain constantly asks one question: does this matter right now? If the answer is no, reality simply disappears. If your brain decides what you notice, what you ignore, and even when you become aware of your own decisions, then another question becomes unavoidable. Can other people influence those hidden processes without you realizing it? The answer is yes. And in the next chapter, you'll discover how advertisers, politicians, social media platforms, and even complete strangers can quietly shape your decisions before you ever believe they're yours. Most people believe manipulation is obvious. They imagine loud advertisements, aggressive salespeople, or persuasive speeches. But the most powerful forms of influence are almost invisible. They don't force you to make a decision. They simply change the conditions under which your brain makes one. By the time you think you've made an independent choice, the environment may have quietly guided you toward it. The frightening part isn't that you're influenced. It's that you rarely notice it happening. Psychologists call one of these hidden influences priming. The idea is surprisingly simple. Before you make a decision, your brain is constantly absorbing tiny pieces of information. A word, a color, a sound, a facial expression. Most of these signals never reach conscious awareness, yet they can subtly shift the way you think moments later. Imagine walking into a room filled with calming music, warm lighting, and the scent of fresh coffee. You already feel different, before you've consciously noticed any of those details. Your brain has been preparing your emotional state all along. Your brain is constantly searching for the fastest possible answer. Not because it's lazy, because speed kept our ancestors alive. Imagine hearing a sudden noise in the forest. Waiting several seconds to carefully analyze every possibility could have been fatal. So evolution rewarded brains that made quick predictions. That strategy still protects us today. But in the modern world, it also creates predictable mistakes. Instead of carefully analyzing every situation, your brain relies on mental shortcuts. Psychologists call them heuristics. Most of the time, they're incredibly useful. Sometimes, they're spectacularly wrong. One shortcut is so common that it shapes first impressions every single day. It's called the halo effect. Imagine meeting someone who's confident, attractive, and well-dressed. Without realizing it, your brain may also assume they're intelligent, trustworthy, successful, even if you know absolutely nothing else about them. One positive trait quietly spreads across everything else. Like light surrounding an object, your brain fills in the blanks, long before evidence appears. Now imagine a system designed to take advantage of these shortcuts. Every swipe, every notification, every unexpected reward. Your brain releases tiny bursts of dopamine whenever something unpredictable happens. A funny video, a new message, a surprising comment. Because the reward isn't guaranteed, your brain keeps searching for the next one. It's the same psychological mechanism that keeps gamblers pulling slot machine levers. Only now, the casino fits inside your pocket. Here's the unsettling part. Sometimes, people don't need to convince you. They only need to shape the choices you see. Imagine walking into a cafeteria. Healthy food is placed at eye level. Desserts are hidden farther away. Most people believe they're choosing freely. But the environment quietly increases the odds of one decision over another. This idea is called choice architecture. And once you recognize it, you'll begin seeing it everywhere. Every decision you've made today was influenced by something. Your memories, your mood, your habits, the people around you, the design of a website, the order in which information appeared. None of these forces completely remove your freedom, but they quietly push your brain toward one outcome instead of another. And perhaps the greatest illusion isn't believing that influence exists. It's believing you're the only person immune to it. At this point, it might feel like your brain is running the entire show. Like every decision is predetermined. Like you're simply watching events unfold. But that's not the full story. Because neuroscience has uncovered something remarkable. A way to interrupt automatic thinking. To notice hidden influences. And perhaps regain more control than you ever imagined. The final piece of the puzzle changes everything. After everything we've explored, one question remains. If your brain makes countless decisions automatically, can you ever regain control? The answer isn't as simple as yes or no. You can't stop your brain from using shortcuts. And honestly, you wouldn't want to. Without them, even the smallest decisions would become exhausting. The real goal isn't to eliminate automatic thinking. It's to recognize when it's happening. Because the moment you become aware of an unconscious process, you create an opportunity to change it. That tiny moment of awareness may be the closest thing we have to real freedom. Psychologists often recommend an incredibly simple habit. Pause, just for a few seconds, before replying to a message, before making an important purchase, before reacting in anger. That brief pause allows the more reflective parts of your brain to catch up with the automatic ones. You're creating space between impulse and action. And inside that space, better decisions become possible. Not because your unconscious mind disappears, but because your conscious mind finally joins the conversation. Here's something fascinating. If your environment quietly shapes your behavior, then you can use that knowledge to your advantage. Want to read more? Leave a book where you'll see it. Want to eat healthier? Put healthy food within easy reach. Want to spend less time scrolling? Move distracting apps off your home screen. You're not fighting your brain. You're working with it. The people who seem incredibly disciplined often rely less on willpower and more on intelligent environments. Your brain doesn't just process information. It creates stories. Every memory you recall, every explanation you give yourself, every belief about who you are, is part of an ongoing narrative. Sometimes that narrative empowers you. Sometimes it quietly limits you. I've always been bad at this. I'm just not disciplined. I can't change. The more often those stories are repeated, the more your brain begins to treat them as reality. But stories can be rewritten. And when they change, behavior often changes with them. Remember Benjamin Libet's experiment? There's one detail most headlines never mentioned. Libet believed that although the brain might initiate an action unconsciously, consciousness could still stop it. He called this the veto, a final moment when you could interrupt an automatic impulse before it became reality. Not everyone agrees with his interpretation. Scientists continue debating it today. But whether the veto exists exactly as Libet imagined or not, the idea points towards something deeply important. Awareness may not begin every decision, but it can still shape many of them. Perhaps the greatest illusion isn't that your brain influences your decisions. Of course it does. Your brain is you. The real illusion is believing that because a process is unconscious, it's beyond understanding. Science has revealed something extraordinary. The more we learn about the hidden mechanisms behind thought, the more opportunities we have to shape them. Not perfectly, not completely, but enough to change the direction of our lives. Awareness doesn't remove every bias. It simply gives you a better chance of seeing them. Right now, your brain is already interpreting these words, comparing them with your memories, your experiences, your beliefs. Some ideas will stay with you. Others will quietly disappear, and you won't consciously choose which ones, because your brain is still doing exactly what it has always done: searching, predicting, filtering, helping you survive in a world that's far too complex to process all at once. The question isn't whether your brain controls your decisions. It always has. The real question is, how often do you notice it? If this video changed the way you think about your own mind, then the next question is even more disturbing. What if many of the memories you trust most never happen the way you remember them? Modern neuroscience suggests that memory isn't a recording of the past. It's a reconstruction, and every time you remember something, your brain may be rewriting it. We'll explore that in the next video. Until then, pay attention to your next decision, because now you'll never know whether it was truly yours, or whether your brain quietly made it first.